to see you again. And Rachel and Ira and Sandy and wonderful to say, Melissa, thank you for the way you've run this meeting. I just told the way off the stage, I told Shelley, I love the German principle, tenacity, and that's really what Ohio Citizen Action is. That's what all of us that make these fights, that's what we are and that's what we have to be, so thank you. I noticed in the introduction, Connie kind of laughed and said, you got to tell the rest of the story. In the introduction, she wouldn't know the rest of the story. She talked about my first organizing effort. When I was a senior in high school, we organized the first Earth Day, and we got 1,000 people walking down Park Avenue West in Mansfield. And you clap because, well, you know, senior high school, pretty impressive, right? Except when we got to city, three of us put it together. We got to the Central Park, and we had no idea what to do next. We didn't have speakers, we didn't have a lectern, we didn't have microphones. We just kind of looked around, what are we supposed to do now? So this was 5 years before Citizen Action, so if I had had Ira as a consultant, Sandy or Rachel went in more than that. But some of you had to tell me what to do, but I learned that lesson. I still remember the feeling we had when the three of us turned to each other and like, okay. Anyway, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, an honor to have this award, an honor to also get to introduce Connie a second time, even though Shelley did a really good job of it.
You don't have to do that because she just did it.
I didn't get here quite early enough to meet everybody. Many of you I looked out, I know so many of you, and I know what you've done as organizers, as canvassers, the training you've done, the organizing you've done, the recruiting you've done, and I was talking, I think it was to Sandy, about how some of you answered an ad in the paper. Most of you saw something locally that needed fixing. It might have been a toxic waste dump near your home. It might have been somebody coming and buying farmland and disrupting what was going on in your community. You came to this in different ways, but what you had in common is you saw injustice and you organized and you fought back. And I think it made me think of sort of a short history of this country in the last 100 years. And powerful people don't give you anything. They don't give up power. They don't give up wealth. And go think back 100 years ago in the 30s. Corporations then all of a sudden say, workers, we got to do more for workers. No, workers organized, and they fought for labor law, they fought for minimum wage, they fought for workers' compensation, and we won. And 100 years ago, wealthy people didn't think, too many people are retired, too many people don't have they're dying poor, they just don't have money when they're older and can't work. So we ought to give them Social Security. No, you demanded it, you organized, and you got Social Security. And then in the 1960s, a bunch of segregationist Southern senators and Southern sheriffs didn't say, everybody ought to be able to vote no matter what your background, no matter what you look like, no matter what you believe. No, you had to go into the streets and organize and fight back and die for it in so many cases. And then also in the 1960s, a bunch of insurance companies didn't say, too many people that are older get sick and they don't have health insurance, so we ought to give them Medicare. No, again, you organize and you fought back. I mean, that's what Citizen Action's done for 50 years. When I hear all three of the CEOs, Ira, we call you a CEO. We just call him Ira. But Ira and Rachel and Sandy, you can see as they walk through what they did in the fights you made, in the fights so many of you, pretty much all of you made. I was so taken by the slideshow because I knew probably a fourth of those people. And I liked how you celebrated a canvasser just like you celebrated Mike Schwartzwalder, and just like you celebrated people with titles. And that, because canvasser is a high title in Ohio Citizen Action. I don't want to talk very long. I'm going to turn to Connie in a second, but I just want to say more than ever how important you are. You know what's happening in this country. You know how concerned we all are, and you know the direction we're moving in. I'm not going to make this political speech, but Connie and I will, frankly, one couple seconds. Connie and I have a wisdom, but we all have to come off the sidelines and do even more than we were going to do before. And I don't mean I don't mean just a political campaign. I mean just redouble your efforts. You're already working hard. You can't work much. You know, people I've found more and more, people think this political system is rigged. And it's been rigged for a lot of years. It's more rigged now than it's ever been. Where people at the top are taking advantage more and more of people that they can take advantage of. And it's gotten worse. It's clearly gotten worse. It's going to get worse unless we step up, all of us in this room. And each of us can do something. Connie does it through her extraordinary writing. She's also a really good grandmother and a really good wife and a really good parent and a really good neighbor. And Connie and I just moved. Connie and I just moved to Columbus because we're now 11 minutes away from 5 grandchildren instead of 2.5 hours. When I hear Shelley talk about principle tenacity, that's who we all are. That's who you all are, and that's what's so important in the months and years ahead as we take our country back. My honor to introduce my wife of coming up 22 years through his. You're going to tell the show story. Our first day, nerves. Well, first of all, my mother called me, and my mother said, "You got to read this new writer in the Plain Dealer." And her name's Connie Schultz. I never heard of her. Her column just started. I started reading it. And being the suck up I am generally, I wrote a review. I didn't have anything. I didn't know anything about her. I didn't know anything like that. And I said, "You write like Barbara Kingsolver." That's a pretty good suck up. And so anyway, unless you know I went. So we went back and forth. We had our first date. Well, I brought, again, being the nerd I am, I brought a list of my favorite quotations.
2 pages.
2 pages. Like who does?
Space.
Well, I was 50 and she was 45 by then. And my first quotation. That brings some levity to this. So it was a quote from George Bernard Shaw that I don't want to die until I'm all used up. And that was also one of Connie's favorite quotations. So we were off to a good start.
That's the nerd I am. First of all, Shelley, thank you. It was just wonderful to be introduced by you. Thank you. And to see you so in the thick of things, yeah. So what a legacy to your father that you do this. When Sherrod talks about not giving up, I wasn't going to tell the story, but I want to because he is, walking the walk. When election day, for so many in the country, was a very hard day. For us, it was an earthquake because we hadn't anticipated how it turned out for us and our family. And it was going to be a time of reckoning for us, time to figure things out. But before we could even have those kinds of conversations, Sherrod had a lot to do. And so for the final weeks of his tenure as Senator for Ohio, first of all, he had to find jobs for 70 plus members of his staff, and he did. I mean, he and his senior staff worked so hard. And the other thing he did, to the very end, and attended the White House signing the day after he was no longer a senator, was work to pass the Social Security Fairness Act. Because all our grandchildren were there, most of our grandchildren, and we have 80 to Sherrod said, and they're almost all of them are very young men. She says, "Mom, I just wanted the kids to be here on election night and see what it feels like to win." And I said, "Well, now they're about to learn a really other important lesson. This is how we lose, right? And we lose with grace, in service to the very end. So. It's very hard to buy gifts for Sherrod. He doesn't really want anything. But could you please all tell him that I do? Sherrod had wanted a new guitar. On our second day, he had played the guitar for me. Here Comes the Sun, right? I mean,
you play something?
So we went to, what's that place called? Woody's in Kent. And he plays for musicians, right? We went the Saturday after Election Day. But I love this because we're driving down there and Sherrod's like, all right, we're not going to spend much money on this. And this is my present for him. So we get to this store, and he's trying out his guitars, but then we find this marble. I don't even know, you need to tell you what that sounded like, right? And I said, don't even look at the tech. He looks at it, and he says, we're not going to spend this. And in front of like 6 staff members who were all with us, it was just the most wonderful first outing for us. I said, husband, I am a working wife. You have not had a vacation for 3 years. I am buying you this guitar. You're a rowdy group. I walked in. I don't think I walked more than 6 feet. I never had to move because so many people came up. And I also just want to acknowledge how many women you have running things. To remember all the people who came before us, right? Because that we are not operating alone. We are standing on shoulders, tall shoulders, right? But when we were looking at watching the video of all the different things you do, I thought, isn't this interesting? That all the issues we care about, all the people we fight for, and somehow that's become a partisan issue. I remember in my early days as a columnist. It was not uncommon, it was always men, writing to the editor usually, but sometimes you have an agenda. You have an agenda. So I probably just explained in a column, but yes, I do have an agenda. I was the first in my family to go to college. My father was a utility worker, my mom was a nurse's aide. So government grants, government loans, they're the reason I got to go to college. So of course I'm going to be for that. And I grew up in a union family on my father's side. Support us as a family, and how we had health care that saved my life. When I was rushed by ambulance and almost died with my first major asthma attack when I was a teenager. So, of course I'm going to be pro-union. I've lived the benefit of pro-union. And without the feminist movement, my column would have been running in the so-called women's pages instead of op-ed pages around the country. So I do have an agenda, and I own it proudly. And I think that's where's the hope? Right? People need to feel hope right now. I often recite to myself Nick Cave's definition of hope. Hope is an optimist with a broken heart. We are not wearing the rosy glasses, right, to be optimistic. What we are is we're committed to the concept of hope because we see it. I'm sure with all the hard work you're doing, you see all these moments of hope, though, right? That's why we're here tonight. That's why you do the work you do. That's why we're back in it, because we do have hope. I find hope every day, but I must say tonight, and I try to write down every day, all right, what was the biggest sign of hope? Tonight, it's all of you. My goodness, thank you. I'm going to end this differently than I had planned. I actually had a little note, and I ended up doing it on this, but I wanted to remind myself of something as I was listening to these wonderful speeches. What an inspiration. And then listening to Sherrod, also always an inspiration. I was thinking about what Fred Scott King said in the early 90s. And I'm just going to paraphrase, with every generation, the fight is renewed. Now, some find that discouraging, but see, I find that full of hope. Because what it really means is We outnumber them, always. But the challenge is getting us all to show up, right? And tonight I was thinking, I haven't talked about this one, but I said to Sharon, I think I'm going to mention this scene. I don't know if any of you read Stephen Ives' biography of Martin Luther King. It came out 2 years ago and won the Pulitzer Prize for it. It's called King Biography. So remember there's that scene at the window. This is 1955, December 5th. And it's the day when the Montgomery bus boycott is supposed to begin, maybe. They have no idea. I mean, think about this. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have newspapers helping to promote that this strike was coming, right? They had to go to churches. They had to go talk to neighbors. I mean, it was a massive effort, writing letters, making phone calls. But he had no idea if this was going to work. And so that night, he and Coretta Scott King went to bed and they could not sleep. He was up very early. He just kept getting up and down. Finally, he's sitting at the kitchen table around 5:30 in the morning. And Coretta Scott King walks out to the living room and is looking out the window and she says, Martin, come here. And he walks over to her and they both watch as the first empty bus drives by. And then the second empty bus drives by and Martin says to Coretta, I gotta go. I feel that it's such a metaphor for the time we are in right now. We are standing at the window. We don't know all this work. We don't know if all this work is going to be enough. We don't know what's going to happen next fall. We don't know what's going to happen this fall, frankly, but next fall especially, we're kind of focused on that right now. But here's what we do know, that if we show up, if we all show up, we're going to love the view. Thank you.